Hello and welcome to Raus IAS. This is the Daily News Simplified for the date 7 December 2023. So, in today's discussion, we are going to take 6 topics. For this discussion, 3 topics would be related to prelims, and these will be MCQs, and other 3 topics would be related to mains discussion. So, for our prelims section today, we have picked up these 3 topics. First of which is a Pompe disease, and this is a rare autosomal disorder, right? We'll be discussing more about this disease as we proceed further. Secondly, we have taken Garba disease. Sorry, we have taken Garba folk dance, and this has been recently included by UNESCO as an intangible cultural heritage. Then there will be an MCQ on Privilege Committee of Parliament. And as we proceed further in the mains discussion, there will be discussion over poverty and multidimensional poverty index. The discussion is regarding an editorial which appeared on The Hindu, right? And as we proceed further, we will discuss an important issue which is regarding the challenges in the manufacturing sector in the country, right? Also, we will end our discussion by discussion on CAG, Comptroller and Auditor General of India, and it is regarding the relevance of this position and certain challenges which are faced by the office of CAG, right? So let's start our today's discussion. Our first topic, our first MCQ for today's discussion is based on this news article which appeared on the page number 10 of Indian Express. So this news article is regarding the death of first Pompe patient in the country, right? So in this news article, you have to know about what is this disease, Pompe disease. If we talk about Pompe disease, it is a rare disorder, a rare genetic disorder. And why we have taken this topic is that because UPSC in the prelims examination in the science and tech section ask various questions regarding diseases, okay? Like in the year 2017, we found this particular question which was regarding the spread of Zika virus, right? So let's solve our practice question regarding Pompe disease. But before solving it, let's know some facts about this disease. So Pompe disease or Pompe disease, it is a rare genetic disorder, right? And this is a genetic disorder which is, this genetic disorder is an autosomal recessive disorder. Now what does this term mean? This term means that this disorder will only be passed when there are defective genes in the father and in the mother of any offspring. That is, the defective genes have to be passed from both father as well as mother, and only then this offspring may be affected by this genetic disorder, okay? So it is autosomal recessive disorder. And the other thing is that this is a genetic disorder because of which there is a suppression of an enzyme. So there is deficiency or suppression of an enzyme which breaks down glycogen. So as you know, glycogen is a complex polysaccharide, or it is a complex carbohydrate, right? So if we talk about simplest carbohydrate, you have heard about this term glucose. Glucose is the simplest carbohydrate, right? And what is glycogen? Glycogen is a polymer which is made out of linking various glucose chains, right? So it makes glycogen. Now what happens is that because of this disorder, there is a defect in the gene of that person, and because of which there is a deficiency of an enzyme which is used to break glycogen, right? So when this disorder sets in, the person may not be able to break down glycogen, right? And because of which glycogen would be stored in the various part of that person. Basically, glycogen is stored in liver and in other muscles, and because of which what happens, there is a progressive muscle weakness in that person, there is difficulties in mobility to that person, there are respiratory complications, and there are cardiac implications for that person, right? So let's solve this question now. The question says that with reference to Pompe disease, consider the following statement. The first statement is, it is a rare autosomal recessive disorder. Now this is a correct statement, as we already discussed that this is an autosomal recessive disorder. The second thing is that the second statement is it is caused by a deficiency of an enzyme responsible for breakdown of amino acids. Now this is an incorrect statement, as this disorder is caused by deficiency of an enzyme which is responsible for breakdown of glycogen and not that amino acids, right? So as the question asked, which of the statement given above is or are correct? Our correct answer would be option A, one only. Now let's move on to our next MCQ for the day. This MCQ is inspired by this news article which says that Garba dance gets UNESCO tag of intangible cultural heritage. Now Garba is a devotional dance which is generally performed in the state of Gujarat, and this dance is performed on the occasion of Navratri, which is the celebration of female goddess Durga, which is a festival related to worshipping female deity. And now this dance form Garba breaks all the social boundaries. That is, this dance form is inclusive, and it is inclusive of gender, it is inclusive of social caste, it is inclusive of even religion, and this is a intangible cultural heritage, right? So this has been included by UNESCO in its list of intangible cultural heritage. Now we have taken this question because folk dances are important for our UPSC prelims examination, and in the year 2014 we saw this question in which there were various dance formed and they had to be matched with their particular state. So let's solve this question, which says that consider the following with reference to heritage and culture of India. So there are various cultural heritages. These are Raman, Daskatiya, Garba and Theyam. The question says that how many of the above cultural items are on the UNESCO's list of intangible cultural heritage of humanity. Now let's see this list. Currently there are 15 such cultural items from India which are included in this list. These are Kudiyattam, which is a Sanskrit theatre, and this was the first entry to this list. And other such cultural items include Ramlila, the tradition of Vedic chanting, Ramad, Muddietu, Kalbelia, Shau, Buddhist chanting of Ladakh, Sankirtana, traditional brass and copper craft of Thateras in Punjab, Yoga, Navroj, Kumbh Mela. The last such entrant was Durga Puja in the year 2021, and the latest entrant becomes Garba, right? So if we solve this question, the correct answer would be Ramad and Garba. So our answer would be only 2, as Daskatiya and Theyam are not included in this list, right? Now let's move on to our final MCQ for the day, and this is inspired by this news article which appeared on The Hindu. The news article is regarding the role of special inquiry committees of Parliament. Okay, so special inquiry committees can be formed by Parliament to investigate into matters of public importance. And one such example of a special committee is the Privileges Committee of Parliament, right? So we have framed a question on the Privileges Committee in Lok Sabha, right? And now why we have framed this question is that because UPSC in the prelims examination has asked questions regarding parliamentary proceedings, right? So before solving this question, which is regarding the Privileges Committee in Lok Sabha, let's first understand this committee, right? Now, as the name suggests, privileges. So what are privileges? Privileges are certain kinds of rights, certain kinds of immunities that are granted to the member of parliament. These can be granted to the member of parliament, both the MPs in Lok Sabha as well as in Rajya Sabha, right? So regarding it, there can be a privileges committee can be formed to inquire into any such instances of breach of privileges which has occurred, right? So in this sense, there are certain privileges or certain rights and immunities which are granted to the MPs, okay? And this is a list of such privileges, and these privileges can be collective privileges which can be granted to the group of member of parliaments, and these can also be individual privileges, right? So let me read out a few for you. Like, there are collective privileges like Parliament can make rules to regulate its own procedure and conduct of business and to adjudicate upon such matters. the other privileges are like Parliament can exclude strangers from parliamentary proceedings and can hold secret sittings, right? Like Parliament has right to publish its reports, debate and proceedings, and also the right to prohibit other from publishing the same. And in the same lines, there are individual privileges also, like there is a freedom of speech in the parliament. And in that sense, no member of parliament is liable to any proceedings in any court for anything he or she has said or for any vote given by them in parliament or its committees. In this sense, there are individual privileges regarding freedom of speech, regarding protection of arrest in the rules, and regarding civil laws. And there is also exemption from jury service. So these privileges are mentioned here. You can read it by pausing the video, right? The thing is that in case of breach of these privileges or these rights or immunities given to these MPs, there can be a parliamentary committee which can inquire upon this privilege, right? Now let's solve this question regarding privileges committee in Lok Sabha. The first statement says privilege committee in Lok Sabha consists of 10 members. This is an incorrect statement, as the privilege committee in Lok Sabha consists of 15 members. And if we talk about privilege committee in Rajya Sabha, it consists of 10 members. For Lok Sabha, it is 15 members, right? The second statement says the members of privilege committee are nominated by the speaker. Yeah, this is a correct statement. In case of Lok Sabha, the members of privilege committee are appointed by the speaker. And in case of Rajya Sabha, the members of privilege committee are appointed by the chairman, right? The third statement says the committee cannot recommend the expulsion of a member from the house. Now this is an incorrect statement, as if the breach of privilege is ascertained, then in that case any member, the committee can recommend the expulsion of any member from the house, right? So this is an incorrect statement. Now as the question asked, how many of the above statement is or are correct, our answer would be only one. I hope you understand. Now let's move on to our main topics of today's discussion. The first topic of today's discussion is inspired by this important article which appeared on the editorial section of The Hindu. Now this article says that multidimensional poverty index reduction under the NDA is flawed. Now we are not going upon the political inclination of this article, but the important thing which you might know, which you need to know, is that this article says that there are certain issues in the multidimensional poverty index. Now before understanding or before proceeding forward in this article, we must know that what is multidimensional poverty index, and to know this we should know that what is poverty altogether, right? Like what is poverty, what are the types of poverty, and what are the indicators and what are the measures to measure poverty in any country, right? And in that sense, there is an indicator, multidimensional poverty indicator, which measures multidimensional poverty in any population, right? So in this discussion, we will be dealing with all these aspects. Now, why this topic is important for us? This is because this topic is important for our GS paper 3 economy under the syllabus head inclusive growth and issues arising out of it, right? So based on this theme, in the year 2015, we found a question which was regarding, though there have been several different estimates of poverty in India, all indicate reduction in poverty levels over time. Do you agree? Critically examine the reference to urban and rural poverty indication, right? So this is an important theme for UPSC. Now let's proceed. Let's see this article. Now let's see a few facts about the Niti Aayog's multidimensional poverty index. Now firstly, there is a multidimensional poverty index which is followed globally, and this has been formed by UNDP, United Nations Development Program, right? And inspired by it, the Niti Aayog has also formulated a national multidimensional poverty index for India, right? And the first edition for such national multidimensional poverty index was officially launched in the year 2021, and the second edition for India's National Multidimensional Poverty Index was launched recently in July 2023. Now, what were the findings of this Multidimensional Poverty Index, the latest edition? The findings showed that from the year 2015-2016 to the year 2019-2021, right, the multidimensional poverty in the country has reduced. and around 13.5 crore people in country, they have come out from the grips of multidimensional poverty, right? Also, the report also says that the reduction of multidimensional poverty in rural areas has been higher as compared to the reduction in urban areas, right? So, in this sense, the index shows that the many people in the country are coming out of multidimensional poverty. So, this article says that maybe there are some issues in the parameters or in the methodology which is used in MPI, right? Now, to know this article further, let's first understand what is poverty. Okay, so let's understand what is poverty. So, what is poverty? If we talk about poverty, it is a socio-economic condition, right? And which is because of which there is lack of resources, right? Lack of resources even to meet the basic needs of life. Poverty is a social economic condition because of which there is lack of resources to meet the basic needs of any person, right? This is general definition of poverty. Now, poverty can be defined in two terms. The first type of poverty is absolute poverty. The other type of poverty is relative poverty. Now, what is absolute poverty? As the name itself indicates, absolute. That is, in this kind of poverty, there is a question of even survival, right? That is, the person who is absolutely poor lack even the resources, even the basic resources that are needed for survival. And what could be these resources? These could be food, shelter, and clothing, right? So, even there is a question of survival for that person, right? And now, what is relative poverty? Relative poverty is that when any person may lack resources which are required for to maintain average standard of living. This means that though that person has resources enough to meet its sustenance for their survival, but they lack resources to meet average standard of living in any particular society. Now let's understand this with an help of an example. See, the definition of absolute poverty is universal, but the definition of relative poverty depends on uh, depends on countries to countries, depends on geographical location, that is, depends on region. Even in any particular country, different states or different locations, different regions may have different definitions of relative poverty. Okay, so let's understand this with the help of an example. Suppose in a developed country, owning a car, if we talk about car, it may be a basic necessity in any developed country like US, right? And if we talk about any developing country or any underdeveloped country, owning a car may be luxury, right? So such kind of poverty based on access of certain resources is known as relative poverty, right? In absolute poverty, there is a question of survival, but in relative poverty, there is a question of exclusion. Any person who is relatively poor can be excluded from the opportunities which are provided by that society in any point of time, right? The person may be excluded from accessing services like health services, educational services, or any other services which may be present in that society, but that person may be excluded because he is relatively poor. I think you understood these two concept of absolute poverty and relative poverty. So this is universal and relative poverty is relative. It is specific to any particular location at any particular point of time, right? Now we understood that what is absolute poverty and we also understood what is relative poverty. Now let's move on to find that how do we even determine poverty? So there should be some criteria based on which poverty is determined in any particular. Am I audible to you? There was certain glitch in internet and based on which the video stopped arbitrarily. where were we? Am I audible to you now? Okay. I think I am audible. Sorry for the interruption. There was some connectivity issue. Now, we were discussing this article, our first mains discussion article, which appeared on the editorial section of The Hindu. So, in this article, we were discussing about poverty, and we dealt with that what are the types of poverty. We know, I told you that there are two types of poverty: absolute poverty and relative poverty. And then we were there that I asked you that what is the estimate, how do we estimate poverty in the country, right? So there should be some parameter, or there should be some kind of methodology to uh, to uh, to judge, or to establish, or to measure poverty in any country, right? So in India, generally what we did in the past was that we adopted a consumption based poverty estimate, right? To measure poverty, we based consumption based estimates, right? And one such example of that is poverty line. Okay, so what is a poverty line? Poverty line is a threshold. It is the threshold minimum income threshold, or it is minimum income based on which a person can be classified as above poverty line or below poverty line. For example, if a person earns X amount of money, right? And for example, if X is X amount of money is the threshold for poverty line. So any person who is earning more than X amount of money is above poverty line, and the person who is earning less than X amount of money is below poverty line, right? So poverty line is a consumption based estimate. It is the minimum income required for any person to be classified as above poverty line or below poverty line, right? Minimum level of income required for the person to meet his basic needs, right? And now, to estimate the levels of poverty in the country, or to define poverty line in the country, there have been three important attempts in the country, right, in the past. The first such attempt was by YK Alak Committee. That was established in the year 1979. So YK Alak Committee was the first such attempt by India to define poverty line in the country. Now, what was special about this committee was that the committee advised to adopt a poverty line in the country based on per capita consumption expenditure, right? It based on the minimum calorie intake, in the country, right? So it defined the poverty line baskets in the country for rural and urban areas. There were different poverty line estimates, and these estimates were based on minimum calorie consumption in the country. And based on this, any person who was able to intake 2400 kilocalorie per day in rural India, and any person who is able to intake 2100 kilocalorie in an urban area was above the poverty line, right? And the people who were not able to meet this calorie intake criteria, were defined as below poverty line, right? So our takeaway from this committee is that it was the first estimate to define poverty line in the country. It was based on the minimum calorie intake in the country, right? And there were different poverty line baskets for rural India as well as for urban India. Okay, so these were the minimum calorie intake norms. Now, second such attempt was made by the Lakdawala expert group in the year 1993. Now, what was different in this committee was that this earlier definition of minimum calorie requirement was retained, right? But the difference was that this committee advised a state-specific poverty line to reflect interstate price differential. Now, what does this means? That there should be state-specific poverty line in the country. Now, let us understand this with the help of an example. For example, there are two people who are living in different parts of India. there is a person A who is living in any hilly state, right? Say Himachal Pradesh, say Uttarakhand, or any other hilly state. And there is a person B who is living in, say, south of India, right? So, in these two states, say Himachal Pradesh and say Tamil Nadu, the dietary preferences in these two states for the residents of these two states are different, right? The crop production is different in these two states, right? So, based on this, the inflation in the prices of crops based on the dietary preferences may be different in different states, right? So, in order to account this difference in the crop pricing, in the retail pricing, so there should be state specific poverty line which would reflect, which will show this interstate price differential, right? So this was the basic thing which was added in the Lakdawala expert group of 1993. Now, if you see these two committees for estimation of poverty line in the country, one thing you will observe that they only talked about income based or calorie intake on calorie intake based poverty line, but they did not include the expenditure on health as well as education to define poverty line, right? Now, for that, there was another group which is Tendulkar expert group that was formed in the year 2009. Now, this Tendulkar expert group said that apart from including this calorie intake or calorie based intake norms in the poverty line, there should be incorporation of private expenditure on health as well as education. Now, earlier what happened that post LPG reforms, generally it was assumed that the expenditure, the social sector expenditure on health or education, this is the primary responsibility of government, say central government, right? But after LPG reform, there was more and more participation of private sector industries, or say private sector stakeholders in the sectors like health, education, right? So there was a need which was felt that as the prices to assess these services is increasing, the poverty line estimates in the country should also incorporate the private expenditure on health and education, right? And there should be a uniform poverty line throughout the country, right? So the important thing which was, and this is important, the important thing which was emphasized by Tendulkar expert group was that there should be shift away from the earlier intake norms or the calorie based intake norms to the targeted outcomes. That is, the poverty line estimate should include the targeted outcomes, right? Targeted outcomes, say for the sector of health, what are the targeted outcomes? The decrease in infant mortality rate, the decrease in maternal mortality rate, and for education sector, say the decrease in dropout rate, increase in gross enrollment ratio. So it should also include the targeted outcomes, right? And the private expenditure on health and education must be incorporated. So this was the general overview of consumption based poverty estimation in the country, which is done with the help of poverty line. Now, this consumption based poverty estimation is not holistic, as it only covers a few parameters, a few indicators to gauge poverty levels in the country, right? It is only seeing calorie based intake norms, say health, education, but there are several other dimensions to poverty. Now, to understand this, UNDP, there is a multidimensional poverty index which has launched by UNDP, United Nations Development Program, and this is a holistic indicator to gauge the levels of multidimensional poverty in any country, okay? And in this indicator there are three dimensions of poverty. So there are three weighted criterion, which are health, education and living standards, and these dimensions are further divided into sub dimensions, like health is divided into nutrition, child mortality, education is divided into dimensions like years of schooling, school attendance, living standards is divided into cooking fuel, the access to cooking fuel, sanitation, drinking water, electricity, housing, assets. So if any population, so these are the weighted indicators, and these have been given equal weightage. These indicators have been given equal weightage of 1/3, 0.33, okay? So how is multidimensional poverty estimated? If any person in any country, if he or she is deprived of one third or more than one third of these parameters, if a person is deprived in one third or more than one third of all these dimensions, then that person is categorized as multidimensionally poor, right? And if that person is deprived of one half or more than one half of these parameters, the person is classified as extremely multidimensionally poor, right? So access to all these parameters, to all these facilities is a better indicator of poverty prevailing in any society or any country. Now, inspired by this multidimensional poverty index of UNDP, India has launched its own version of national multidimensional poverty index, right? So again, these are the weighted categories. One third weightage has been given to health, education, and standard of living. And inside this, these are the 12 standards which are specific to India, right? And apart from the 10 indicators of UNDP's index, India has added two new indicators. These are maternal health and bank account. Now, these are to measure the relative levels of poverty in any country. Now, as we already know what is relative poverty, so we can easily understand this. Now, say UNDP has not included bank account as an indicator of standard of living. But in India, see, the major subsidy programs of the government, say DBT program of the government, and the major schemes of the government, these are dependent on access to bank accounts by the population of the country. India is working on financial inclusion of the population of the country, and for it, they must have access to the bank accounts, right? So this has also become a basis to identify the standard of living of any person, right? So for India, if a person does not have a bank account, or if he is deprived of this facility, he may be included as multidimensionally poor based on other indicators, based on his deprivation of other indicators also. So I hope you understand this. Now let's understand that if we already have consumption based poverty line estimates, why do we even need multidimensional poverty based estimations? Now this is because of the fact that the consumption based poverty line indicators, they only see the deprivation in income, but they fail to see non-income deprivations or multiple deprivations. Now let's understand this with the help of an example. Now let's suppose there are two people, person A and person B, right? Suppose both of them are economically deprived. Both of these people have income deprivation, right? Say the person earns rupees 1000 per month, and this person also earns rupees 1000 per month, right? So both of them have equal level of income inequalities, right? But this person has, suppose person A has the facilities to access education, right? He has the facilities to access healthcare services, suppose in primary government hospitals, or say free education, state sponsored education, and some other services. Now say this person B, despite having same income level, he is not able to access other services which are present in the vicinity of person A, right? Maybe because there are some social deprivations, maybe because this person is a woman, right? Based on her gender, she is being discriminated, right? Suppose the person is of lower caste, and based on this, the person is being discriminated, right? Suppose the person in the village of this person, these facilities are altogether not available. So based on these social deprivations, person B has multiple level of deprivations as compared to person A, right? So in the first kind of estimate, we can only see the income level deprivation of these two people. But since these two people are not equally poor, person B is more poor as compared to person A, right? So person B has multiple levels of deprivation in poverty, right? So person B is multidimensionally poor based on his exclusion. So multidimensional poverty index based on these parameters may be more easily able to assess the kind of deprivation person B is facing, right? So this is the first important of multidimensional poverty index, that is the better gauging of the dimensions in which a person is lacking, right? The second thing is incidence versus intensity. This is nearly same. These concepts are related, but see the difference. So in earlier kind of estimation, there was a poverty line, right? And say there are 10 people in the country. Just for an example, there are 10 people in the country who earn less than 10,000 rupees per month, right? So there are 10 people, and all of these people are poor, right? So in the first kind of estimates, we will only know the incidence of poverty in the country. That is how many people in the country are poor. Say there are 10 people in the country who are poor because they earn less than the poverty line, right? Now, with the help of multidimensional poverty index, we can find out the intensity of poverty among these people. There can be people who have a different kind of deprivation based on different kind of indicators. Maybe there is a group of people who is able to meet their nutritional need, but they are not able to meet their standard of living. And there are other kind of people who are able to meet some standard of living, but they are not able to meet other facilities which are available in their neighborhood, right, or in their society. So this kind of estimates tell the intensity of poor among these people, right? That is, it can reflect the presence of inequality among equals, right? Also the presence of inequality among unequals. If they are earning less than 10,000 but less than 1,000, but if their income is relatively lesser, right? So it is a better indicator of the presence of inequalities among the equals in any society. It reflects the degree of poverty in any society, in simple words. The third thing is that, as we already saw the multiple level of deprivations in any society, and we also saw the degree of poverty among equals, right? Then this data can be used to make evidence-based policies. Any government may see that which section of society in which locality is lacking what kind of services, and the focus of the government would be to provide targeted services to that section of population. So this is government can form evidence-based policies for their welfare, right? As multidimensional poverty index does take account of absolute poverty as well as of relative poverty in any population, right? So these are some of the significance that why multidimensional poverty index is a better approach, or it is a good approach, right? Now there are certain challenges which were also highlighted in that article. The basic challenge is that, as we saw that in the national multidimensional poverty index of India, there are 12 parameters. So there is significant number of indicators in this index, and accounting for or to fetch data for each kind of indicators for every 12 indicator in the country would be a very cumbersome task. In a country like India, which has huge geographical extent, right? In a country like India, where there are already existing variations between different subgroups, between various sections of the society, and in that society where there is already heterogeneous, the society which is not homogeneous, right? In that society, to gauge the level of depravity in different indicators, and there are 12 indicators, right? So it would be a cumbersome task. So there would always be a scope of data, reliability of data. So reliability of data would always be a challenge, right? As in the article itself, it has been said that the data for the second national multidimensional poverty index which was released in July 2023, which we already discussed, the data has been sourced from National Family Health Survey 5, right? This survey was done from the year 2019 to 2021. Now, in the estimation of National Health Family Survey itself, there are challenges, right? As the survey, the people who conduct survey, they are not properly trained. Sometimes the survey procedure is outsourced to any other group of population or people who are undertrained. They may lack sufficient fund, they may lack sufficient resources. Also, the sample size of the population they are surveying is less as compared to judge the extent of multidimensional poverty in the country, right? So, the first and foremost thing regarding the reliability of multidimensional poverty index is data, right? We need a credible data, authentic data to map the extent of poverty in the country. So, what should be the best approach? The best approach should be using the combination of earlier estimates, which is using the combination of poverty line estimates, also by using the combination of multidimensional poverty indicators to better gauge the levels of population in any country, and then to formulate policies for their addressal, right? And as we all know, this is important because the Sustainable Development Goal 1 says no to poverty of any kind, right? So in order that India fulfills the Sustainable Development Goal 1, India should focus on eliminating poverty of all kind in the country, right? And the best possible approach is using the mix approach, right? Now let's move on to our next topic for today's discussion, which is inspired by this news article which appeared on the page number 10 of Indian Express, right? So this news article says that India, which is currently the fifth largest economy in the world, is soon gearing to be the third largest economy of the world, right? So there is an estimate that the economy of the country would soon overpower other countries, and India would soon become the third largest economy of the world. Presently, the leading economies of the world are US, China, Germany, and Japan, right? And after which India is the fifth largest economy in the world, right? And now this enormous increase in the GDP of the country, or this enormous increase in the economic potential of the country, should be followed by the increase in all the sectors of the country, right? That is, all the sectors of the country like agriculture, manufacturing, and services, they would have to speeden up. They would have to catch their pace such that India becomes a third largest economy, right? So this article says that for this there is an opportunity for India to emerge as a major global manufacturing hub, right? And so the focus should be given specifically to the manufacturing sector in the country, right? So in this article we will see some facts about manufacturing sector in the country, right? Why it is important and what are the challenges in India is facing in manufacturing, and we will also see some way forward in this regard. And now why this topic is important for us? This is important for our GS paper 3 economy under the syllabus at Indian economy and issues related to planning, mobilization of resources, growth, development, and employment, right? And based on this, in the previous years, we saw questions like in the year 2023 also there was a question regarding that faster economic growth of the country requires increased share of the manufacturing sector in GDP, particularly that of MSMEs, right? And there was other such question which was asked in the year 2017, right? So let's proceed further and see some nuances related to this topic. Now, if we talk about manufacturing sector, right? So India, the sector, we've seen that the manufacturing sector in the country the growth of this sector has stagnated. So before the LPG reforms, prior to the LPG reforms of 1991, the sector contributed nearly to around 16% of India's GDP. And if we see back in the year 2023, still the contribution of this sector, the manufacturing sector, to India's GDP is just 17%, right? Manufacturing sector contributes 17% to India's GDP, and it employs around 15% of Indian population, right? 12 to 15% of Indian population, right? Now we have seen that other sectors, say specifically in India, there have been skewed focus to the services sector in the country, which is no doubt contributing more to India's GDP, right? Around 55 to 60% to India's GDP is being contributed by the services sector. But the importance of manufacturing sector can be seen by the fact that the first thing is that the capacity of this sector to provide enormous employment to the population of the country. See, one distinguishing feature between manufacturing sector and services sector is that services sector to a large extent provide employment to skilled workforce, right? But this the same thing is not true with manufacturing sector, as it has the potential to provide employment to the diverse sections of population. They can be skilled, they can be semi skilled, or sometimes even to semi skilled or people with inferior skills also, right? They can be part of they can be part of labor intensive manufacturing units or manufacturing industries, right? So the first thing is the enormous opportunity this sector gives, provides in employment opportunities, right? The other thing, and now when this sector will provide employment, this will lead to increase in income, to increase in disposable income of these people, right? And these people will spend money and create demand in the economy. So employment generation is necessary for economic development of any country, right? And because of manufacturing sector, because of increased demand, there would be increased production, which would lead to increase in GDP of the country, right? And plus other thing is that rise in manufacturing sector would also lead to the rise in agricultural sector as well as services sector through its forward linkages and backward linkages, right? So we can see that rise in manufacturing has a multiplier effect in the economy in terms of employment generation, also in terms of economic development, by helping in the development of agriculture as well as service sector also. Other thing is that why do we want to increase manufacturing? This is because to promote exports. When there is increase in the quality domestic products, then there would be a higher potential for any country to export its good to other countries, right? And what would be this will in turn help in expansion of GDP. Also, this will help in accumulation of higher forex reserve in the country, right? The forex on account of imports go out of the country and on account of export are accumulated, right? So this would be a factor such that forex is accumulated in the country, right? Also, an important aspect of manufacturing is that this will automatically, for the expansion or for the establishment of manufacturing units like companies or plants, there should be enough infrastructure, right? There should be enough transport, there should be sufficient supply chain, there should be reliable electricity and power, right? And if manufacturing sector is going to be established in any particular location, it is bound that that area is going to develop in its infrastructure, right? And accordingly it would also lead to technological advancement, right? And India is a country which has enough resources, right? India has enough land resources, right? India has enough human resources. So we don't have dearth of raw material, right? We don't have dearth of human potential, right? Still, our manufacturing sector has somehow remained stagnant at 17% of India's GDP. So this is the goal of government to at least by in the coming years to raise this contribution of manufacturing sector from 17 now to 25% in near future, right? Now let's understand that what are the issues, because we saw these issues, we saw that manufacturing sector has stagnated to some extent. So what are the issues which are plaguing manufacturing in the country, right? So let's start with the basic proponents of manufacturing, right? the basic things which are required in manufacturing, and then let's build further this article. The first thing which is required in any for any manufacturing company or industry to set up is land, right? So what are the challenges in India? There are certain challenges in country regarding land acquisition, right? Land acquisition in country is very challenging because of various issues which are plaguing the fast or the speedy acquisition of land. Land acquisition in country is a lengthy process, is a time, it takes time. Now this is because there are various factors for it. The first thing is that India has outdated, or India has traditional land records, right, which are not digitalized. So there is lack of digitalized land records, right? So because of this, whenever a company comes to acquire any land, there are several cases, there are several litigations, right? And because of these litigations, precious amount of time, energy and resources are wasted, and this hampers the economic development of that regions. Also, in order also to acquire land, there are concerns like population should have to be displaced from that position, right? There are various environment assessment, impact assessment related to it. There are various social impact assessment related to it, right? Displacement of population, sometimes it becomes a political issue. So also, the land titling in the country is not conclusive. There are some issues in the land titling in the country itself. Because of all these factors, the land, which is the primary resource for development of any manufacturing factory, it becomes very difficult for those companies to acquire land, right? Also, one more thing, in India, there have been less focus on developing land leasing model, right? So because of all these factors, there are heavier costs in acquiring land, right? Other thing is the issue of labor in the country. Now there are two issues regarding labor in the country. The first thing is that primarily the India has huge labor force, but most of them are semi skilled, right? So we have resources which are not skilled. The other thing is lack of skilled resources. The other thing is that the labor laws in the country are very rigid, right? And because of which there are issues in hiring and firing of labor. Now this can be understood by one example, that in the Industrial Dispute Act, there was a provision that any company who has more than 100 workers, the company, if in order to lay off these workers, has to take permission from the state government, right? So this was the requirement for this company to lay off its workers, right? So in that case, what that company will do, that because it is not able to fire or lay off those workers, that company or any other company would not undertake formal contracts, right, or formal employment. They would rather go into informal contracts, right? So there is other thing, that you know that most of around 85 to 90% of Indian people are employed in informal sector. This is also one of the reason that why, because of this rigid labor laws in the country, many companies prefer to go into informal contracts, right? Recently, in the year 2020, there were 4 labor codes which was conceptualized or which was formulated in the country, but not much progress has been done in implementation of those labor laws by different states, right? So still the issue of labor, that is the skilling issue of labor, and also because of rigid labor laws in the country, these issues persist, right? The other thing is logistics. Now we know that for any country to establish, there should be enough infrastructure in the country, and that infrastructure should be in the terms of road transport, railway transport, or port transport, right? So for many years together, India had a weaker transportation system. India had lack of supply chains. India had lack of warehouses, storage, and plus other factors which are required is reliable power, say reliable electricity, reliable gas connection. So India lagged for major time. India lagged in this infrastructure, in providing infrastructure to manufacturing company, and this was also one of the reason which plagued manufacturing sector in the country, right? Lack of infrastructure. And the other thing is, the other requirement for setting up an industry is capital, right? So lending facility. In India, say there is a company who there is an individual or company who wants, for example, there is a person who wants to establish a company in any particular area. For that, he requires capital. So what would be his routes of capital? First thing is, the person can ask the capital as form of loans from banks, right? But we have seen that majority of the banks in the country are facing with NPA crisis, right? They don't have enough money to lend, right? So because of this NPA crisis, these people are not getting cheaper loans, right? They are not cheaper loans. They are not able to fetch cheaper loans. This is one of the issue. Other thing is that now if banks don't have money, they would take a route to market, right? And in that sense, they will float corporate bonds. So what are corporate bonds? These are the debt instruments. These are kind of bonds which are floated by any individual or any company, right? If the person needs money, they can float these debt instruments, and the investors can buy those debt instruments, right? And in that procedure, the person would get money or get loan, would get capital, right? But in India, what we have seen that this corporate bond market in the country is narrow, right? So this means that there are not enough takers of these corporate bonds in Indian market, right? And because of which there is a lending issue or there is a funding issue to these manufacturing, to set up manufacturing units, right? The other thing is that there is an issue of missing middle in the country. Now, right from after independence, there were focus on developing heavy industries, right? Like cement industries, like fertilizer industries, like other industries, steel industries, right? So these industries are large scale industries, and they are capital intensive, right? They are capital intensive, and these capital intensive large manufacturing units, though they contribute enough to GDP of a country, but the scale of labor, but they do not employ enough employment. This is because of the fact that majorly their work may be technologized. Technology, they may be equipped with enough technology to do that work, right? The other thing is that there are MSMEs in the country, right? MSMEs are smaller industries, right? These may not contribute, they also contribute enough to GDP of the country, but in that sense, they employ enough people, right? So the employment potential of MSMEs is far higher as those of capital intensive large companies, right? Now, in between capital intensive large companies and MSMEs, there is a missing middle. That is, the medium sized companies in the country are missing, right? And such kind of companies would be the best space which would contribute enough to the GDP of the country, and they would also employ enough people, right? So in India, because of all these policy issues and all these above issues which we discussed earlier, these companies were not able to sustain, right? So this is the crisis, or this is the missing middle crisis in the country, right? And also, if we talk about MSMEs, they do have other structural issues, right? Now, the other thing is inverted tax structure in the country. So the tax structure in the country is like, there is more tax on primary goods or the raw material. There is more tax on raw material as compared to that of finished goods, right? So the raw materials, there is more tax on raw material as compared to those on finished goods, okay? And because of which, what happens is that the importing finished products is more lucrative as compared to setting domestic industries for production of goods. Now let me simplify it. This means that because there is more tax on primary goods, like say cotton. There is more tax on cotton, and there are other industries like textile industry, leather industries. So in that sense, establishing a unit to manufacture textile and to manufacture textile would be costly as compared to as compared to establishing a unit which is importing cotton cloths, say from Vietnam, say from Bangladesh, and that firm is selling its product to India, right? An Indian firm is importing goods from Vietnam, Bangladesh, and that firm is selling that finished product to the country. So that would be more lucrative because the tax on finished products is way lower. Now this has its own challenges. The first challenge is that this would hamper domestic production in the country, right? And the other thing is that uh, the the imported products would be more lucrative as compared to domestically produced products, right? So these are some challenges because of this inverted tax structure, right? So these are certain issues which are plaguing the manufacturing sector. Now let's see the solutions. The solutions also lies in the problem, near the problems. The first thing is regarding the land issue, that regarding the land acquisition cost and time taken, there should be digitalization of land records in the country, right? And enough steps like Swamitva scheme and other schemes are being taken by the government in this regard. So by digitalization of government, by digitalization of land records, there would be less room for litigations, right? And there should be enough development of land leasing models in the country. The second thing is labor laws in the country should be made more flexible, right? And the labor should be skilled. And for this, there are various initiatives of the government like Skill India initiative and other initiatives. And for liberalizing labor laws in the country, there are 4 labor codes which were formulated in the year 2020. So there should be effective implementation of those labor codes, right? And to address the issues related to logistics, enough importance should be given in establishing or in for the construction of dedicated freight zones, dedicated corridors to transport freight, right? And that could be, and the other issues like reliable power supply, and these issues should be sorted, right? And for lending, to facilitate enough funds for these for manufacturing units, the option should be that if money is not available in Indian markets, the laws for external commercial borrowing should be more liberalized, right? And enough policy intervention should be taken in the country to promote ease of doing business, and because of which there would be more inflow of FDI or foreign direct investment in the country, right? And this will facilitate funds to manufacturing units, right? And other thing is that and by other such initiatives, like government of India has taken initiatives like Make in India initiatives, right? And the government has taken initiative like production linked incentive schemes. So these are some of the initiatives by the government in this regard to boost domestic manufacturing country, right? And together, and by effective implementation of these initiatives, India can reach the goal of being the third largest economy in the world, right? And with enough space of and with enough contribution of manufacturing sector in that journey, right? So let's come to our last topic for today's discussion. This last topic is regarding this news article which appeared on page number 2 of The Hindu. This last news article is regarding this news article says that Kejriwal recommends CAG audit of Jal Board's account. It is regarding the audit of Comptroller and Auditor General of Jal Board accounts. Now, in this article, we will see, since we are running out of time, we will see some facts regarding Comptroller and Auditor General of India (CAG), and we will see that what are the challenges regarding to his office, right? Now CAG, the position of CAG is important for us for our GS paper 2 Polity and Governance. Under the syllabus head, appointment to various constitutional posts, powers, functions, and responsibilities of various constitutional body. Since CAG is a constitutional body, right? Now let's see a few facts regarding Comptroller and Auditor General of India. This is also known as Controller and Auditor General, right? So, Controller and Auditor General of India is an independent constitutional body, right? And this is so important that it's important can be gauged from the fact that this body is a constitutional body, right? And the formulation of this office is under Article 148 of Indian Constitution, that there should be a CAG in India, Controller and Auditor General in India. Now, this CAG is known as guardian of public purse in the country. That is, this is an important authority, important body in India, which aims to maintain financial discipline in the country, right? Now, how does this do this? This under the powers of Article 148, right? And also the powers from CAG Act of 1971. CAG has enough power to audit the accounts of central government, right? CAG can audit the account of central government, state government, and various government departments, right? And if we talk about the tenure of CAG, it is till the age of 65 years and 6 years. He has a 6-year terms, and he cannot be reappointed again. So CAG is known as guardian of public purse, and it is an important post to maintain financial discipline in the country for efficient financial administration of the country. Now, how does it do this? This does by setting the financial accountability of the governments, of the central governments as well as the state government and government departments, right? For lawful utilization of resources in the country. That is, the expenditure which the government shows that this is the expenditure which we are going to incur. Is that expenditure in lines with those of parliamentary laws? Is that expenditure in line with those of the laws which are formulated in constitution, right? That is the expenditure which is being incurred by the government, central, state governments, or government departments, is that expenditure lawful? The first thing is that. The second thing is that by auditing the accounts of the government, what does it do? It prevents any cases of financial irregularity in the spending, in the expenditure which has incurred by the government departments, right? And it also, by auditing, it also aims to prevent the instances of corruption if they may occur in doing such duty, right? Also, it aims to promote transparency and to improve good governance in the country, as the reports which are published by the CAG, they are made public, right? So we can also see that how the public money is being spent by the government offices. If I have to summarize, I would say CAG audits the account of central, state, and government offices, right? In order to boost transparency, in order to boost good governance, right? In order to curtail corruption and to maintain financial discipline in the country, right? Now, let's see. There are certain issues, but since it is such an important constitutional body, but this body is plagued by certain issues. Now, let's see what are these issues. The first thing is that there is an issue in the appointment process of CAG, right? There is no mentioned procedure in the Indian Constitution or in the CAG Act. So there is no procedure regarding the appointment, regarding the qualification of a person who can be appointed as a CAG, right? So sometimes what happens that the executive, they appoint CAG to a person of their own choice, and this hampers, and sometimes the appointment of CAG is such that central governments does not even consult state governments before appointing CAG, right? So this hampers federal cooperation, constitutional federalism, right? And this also hampers, and this also risk the transparency of this constitutional body, as there can be some conflicts of interest regarding the person which the government has chosen, which the executive has chosen as a CAG, right? So the first thing is regarding the appointment of CAG, right? There are no specific procedures regarding it. The second issue is regarding the functioning of this body. Now let's understand this. CAG, as the name says, Controller and Auditor General of India. But the post of CAG in India is only that of Auditor General. He is not controller. What does this mean? If we compare the post of CAG of India to that of UK. Now what happens in UK that before withdrawing any money from public exchequer, say consolidated fund of that state or any public fund, there should be a a prior permission has to be asked to the CAG of that country, UK. But in India this is not the same, right? In India, if government wants to withdraw funds from CFI, so there is no permission, there is no role of CAG in it, right? There is no permission, prior permission. Government has not government has not government does not has to ask does not has to seek the permission of CAG prior to prior to prior to taking out funds from CFI, right? Consolidated Fund of India. So this is that the role of CAG has been reduced to only auditor, and this has been said that he only does the post-mortem of the funds or the post-mortem of the expenditure which the government incurs. That is only after the expenditure has been incurred by the government, CAG will audit that expenditure, that how the government has done that expenditure. But prior to it, before arbitration of funds, CAG has no power, right? So this is regarding the role of CAG, which has been reduced to only auditor. The second thing is that there are certain secret service expenditure in the country done by certain secret service departments, and regarding those departments, CAG has no power to audit the expenditure of those departments, right? The other thing is that as CAG can only audit the government accounts when CAG has been given access to important confidential documents or important data by the government. But sometimes what happens is that government does not give the supply of records to CAG, or government gives the supply of records to CAG at the last moment. And because of this, what happens is that the report of CAG may be compromised because of lack of reliable data, right? Also, CAG has no enforcement authority. Mostly what happens is that the report which are tabled by CAG, they are sometimes they are just reports, and their recommendations are not implemented by the government, right? Because CAG does not have an enforcement power. That is, the recommendations of it are merely advisory in nature, right? And that's why sometimes the report may end up in junk files of the government. And so as there is no enforcement authority, so this undermines the position of CAG, right? Also, there are incidences of inefficiency in the office of CAG. This is because there is shortage of trained manpower, right? There is shortage of human resources in the CAG office, and because of which the quality of reports is compromised. And also there is delay in tabling of reports from CAG side sometimes, right? So these are some of the major issues which the office of CAG is facing in the country. Now, what is the way forward in this regard? The way forward is that first we saw there is an issue in appointment of CAG. So in order to maintain the credibility of the position of CAG, the appointment procedure should be transparent, right? And in that sense, there could be certain appointment procedure, certain best practices can be followed from various countries, or in case of appointment of Lokpal, or in case of appointment of Central Vigilance Commission, we have seen that there is a committee of Prime Minister, leader of opposition, Home Minister, and various other people. So such kind of committee can be made prior to the appointment of CAG, such that the position of that office remains dignifiable, right? And he is away from any biases, or there are no conflict of interest, right? So appointment procedure should be improved, right? Other thing is enforcement. That is, certain kind of enforcement power should be given to CAG, either by doing any constitutional amendment, or either by doing amendment in the CAG Act of 1971, right? Because divide of this power, there is no the role of CAG remains just advisory, right? The other thing is time limit. Now, generally, there is no time limit for which that the report of CAG should be tabled, right? Or there is a no time limit regarding which the data, the reliable data should be given to CAG by the government. So there should be a time limit, like RTI time limit, like there is a time limit in Right to Information Act of 1 month, right? Though it is not being followed, but there is a time limit. In that order, there should be a time limit to which the data should be provided to CAG, and other thing, the data should be the CAG, there should be time limit regarding which CAG should deposit or should place report in front of Parliament, right? And the office of CAG should be enlarged, because there are now the earlier when the office of CAG was made, there was just, it was regarding the majority of expenditure was done by public functionaries, right? Like governments or public departments. But now, as we have seen, the expenditure, bulk expenditure in the country is also being done via the PPP route, right? Via the private expenditures. Okay, so the scope of CAG should be enlarged to also accommodate certain kind of PPP investment or PPP mode, right? So the expenditure done via PPP mode, public-private partnership, should also be audited by CAG in order to maintain such in order to maintain that this expenditure is away from any corruption. And also, these all initiatives are so there should be technological advancement. CAG report should follow latest technological advancement, and also there should be inclusion of enough manpower such that the credibility of this post is not compromised, right? So this was all regarding the CAG issues faced by this office, and there were certain way forwards in this regard. So thank you, and this is the end of the discussion. And if you have any queries, you can ask them in the comment section. We will try to solve your answers, doubts. Okay, thank you.